There is a 12-mile area in Yellowstone that does not appear on any public map. Every ranger knows about it, but none of them mention the area we call Sector 7. Until now. Because after what happened last month, after learning that we lost 3 more people, I cannot remain silent about what comes next. Whatever happens, happens. Everyone has the right to know what is really going on in the area 5 kilometers north of Old Faithful, where we are not allowed to enter but still cannot prevent people from finding it. I am David Carson, and I have been a ranger in Yellowstone National Park for over 19 years. What I have seen and experienced during this time is beyond description. I have rescued tourists from hot springs, saved travelers from the wilderness, and witnessed every kind of courage and foolishness that the cruelty of the wild brings out in people. But none of this, including my training and experience, prepared me for Sector 7. Before I tell you what happened last month and what finally broke my silence, I want you to understand one thing very clearly. If you're watching this while planning a trip to Yellowstone, if you're an adventurer seeking the purest, most untouched wilderness, you should be cautious. What I'm about to say could save your life. Before continuing, if you subscribe and like the video, you will be contributing greatly to the continuation of new stories to come. Yellowstone is not just an ordinary park. It is also a supervolcano, a thin spot on the Earth's crust with rules that are out of the ordinary. It is 2 million acres of wilderness standing on top of a magma chamber that could end civilization if it ever erupts. Tourists come here for Old Faithful, bison, wolves, the unique beauty of the wild, and the grand prismatic spring, thinking they'll get great Instagram photos, which I think is complete nonsense. While visiting this place, one of the unique wild nature and wonderful landscapes that the Creator has given us, instead of enjoying the moment and having an unforgettable experience, they are constantly on their phones trying to take photos that will get the most likes. For example, they don't know that geothermal activity does things that cannot be explained by traditional geology or the areas we surround. I learned about the 7th District shortly after starting as a ranger in 2005. My training officer, Bill Hutchins, pulled me aside after the morning briefing and gave me a map that was different from the one we gave to tourists, which surprised me quite a bit at the time. On this map, there was a circular area marked in red, approximately 3 miles northwest of Old Faithful, which was shown as uninterrupted wilderness on public maps. "This is Sector 7, Bill said, his voice low even though we were alone in his office. "You don't go there. You don't send anyone there. If someone reports seeing something strange in that area, you log it in the Green Journal, not the regular incident reports. And if someone goes missing there..." He paused, looking older than his 58 years. "You wait 72 hours before searching. That's protocol. Wait 72 hours. But regulation says we initiate search and rescue within..." "I know what regulation says," Bill cut me off. "This isn't about regulation. This is about survival. Things that go into Sector 7 don't come out the same. Sometimes they don't come out at all. And sometimes..." He trailed off, staring at something I couldn't see. "Sometimes they come out wrong." I thought he was hazing the rookie, trying to spook me with ghost stories. Every park has its legends, its unofficial histories passed down from ranger to ranger. But the look in Bill's eyes wasn't humor. It was fear, mixed with the exhaustion of carrying knowledge that weighs on you every single day. Over my first few years, I learned to recognize the signs of Sector 7 encounters. Hikers would come to the ranger station, confused and disoriented, claiming they'd lost hours or sometimes days. Their GPS devices would show impossible routes, straight lines through terrain that should have taken hours to traverse. Digital cameras and phones would have corrupted files. images that looked like overlapping exposures from different times of day, different seasons, sometimes different years. The strangest case in my early years was in 2008. A family of 4, the Meridans from Ohio, had gone hiking near the western edge of Sector 7. They'd been reported missing by their hotel when they didn't return for 2 days. Following protocol, we waited the full 72 hours before searching. When we finally went in, we found them exactly where they'd entered the zone, standing in a circle, holding hands, completely catatonic. They were physically unharmed, but psychologically destroyed. The parents never spoke again, spending the rest of their lives in psychiatric facilities. The children, aged 8 and 10, would only repeat the same phrase over and over. We went home, but home wasn't there anymore. What made it worse was their equipment. Their cameras contained photos dated 3 years in the future, images of the same location, but with different vegetation, different weather, and in the background of one photo, a Yellowstone National Park sign with a redesign we hadn't even proposed yet. That sign design would be approved and installed in 2011, exactly as shown in their 2008 photos. The Green Journal, which Bill had mentioned on my first day, became my obsession. It was a physical logbook kept in a locked drawer in the Chief Ranger's office, off the grid, no digital copies. Every Yellowstone Ranger since 1972 had contributed to it, documenting the impossible things that happened in and around Sector 7. Reading through it was like descending into madness, each entry more disturbing than the last. There was the case from 1987 where a solo hiker's emergency beacon activated from inside Sector 7, but when the rescue team arrived, they found the beacon buried under a fallen tree that had been dead for at least 50 years. The hiker was never found, but his voice was recorded on park radio frequencies for the next 6 months, always saying the same thing. I'm at the overlook, but the park is gone. There's just ocean here. Cold, black ocean. In 1994, a geology team studying the underground magma chambers reported finding a hot spring in Sector 7 that wasn't connected to the volcanic system at all. The water was coming from somewhere else, somewhere that shouldn't exist under Wyoming. They took samples, but the water defied analysis. It contained isotopes that suggested it had been frozen for millions of years and boiling at the same time. In 2001, a ranger named Patricia Downs entered Sector 7 against all protocols, trying to rescue what she thought was an injured hiker. She came back 6 hours later, but she'd aged 15 years. Her hair had gone gray, she had wrinkles that hadn't been there that morning, and medical tests confirmed her cellular age had advanced. She quit the next day, moved to Florida, and refused to ever speak about what she'd seen. She died of old age in 2009, at the biological age of 90, despite being born in 1968. But the most disturbing pattern in the Green Journal was the videos. Starting in 2010, when smartphones became ubiquitous, we began receiving video messages from missing hikers who'd entered Sector 7. The videos would appear on their social media accounts, uploaded somehow despite there being no cell service in that area. The timestamps were always wrong, sometimes days before the hikers had gone missing, sometimes years after. The videos all showed the same thing, the missing hikers, very much alive, in what looked like Yellowstone, but different. The geology was wrong, mountains in the wrong places, geysers where there shouldn't be any. And in every video, the hikers would say they were fine, they were safe. They'd found the most beautiful part of the park. They'd beg their families to come find them, giving specific coordinates that, when checked, led right to the heart of Sector 7. I became the unofficial expert on Sector 7, the ranger others came to when they encountered something they couldn't explain. I learned to recognize the signs, the way electromagnetic fields fluctuated at the boundary, the slight change in air pressure that made your ears pop, the smell of ozone mixed with something organic and wrong. I learned that certain times were worse than others, dawn and dusk during the full moon, and especially during the summer solstice and winter equinox. For 19 years, I managed to keep people away from Sector 7, to maintain the secret, to uphold the protocols that kept the horror contained. But last month, everything changed. It started with a group of university students from Montana State, studying the park's thermal features for their graduate thesis. Dr. Jennifer Huang and her 3 students had permits to study backcountry hot springs, and somehow, I still don't know how, they'd identified an anomaly in the thermal imaging right in the middle of Sector 7. They'd applied for permits to investigate, which were denied, but they went anyway. Young, brilliant, and convinced they were on the verge of a major geological discovery. They entered Sector 7 on October 15th at 7:43 a.m. I know the exact time because that's when their GPS trackers, which all graduate students were required to wear for safety, suddenly showed them in 4 different locations simultaneously. One signal placed them in Sector 7. Another showed them 800 miles away in Nebraska. A third had them in the same location but 150 feet underground. The 4th signal was coming from the same coordinates but was somehow broadcasting from 3 days in the past. Following protocol, I waited 72 hours. It was the hardest wait of my career, knowing those young people were out there, possibly still alive, possibly needing help, while I sat in my station doing nothing. I spent those 3 days reviewing every entry in the Green Journal, looking for patterns, clues, anything that might help when we finally went in after them. On the morning of October 18th, I assembled a team. Not just any team. Rangers who'd had previous contact with Sector 7 anomalies and survived relatively intact. There was Maria Santos, who'd lost 6 hours in 2019 but came back with only minor memory gaps. Tom Whitehorse, whose grandfather had been a ranger and had passed down oral traditions about places in the park where the earth dreams wrong dreams. And surprisingly, Bill Hutchins, now 73 and officially retired, but who insisted on joining when he heard about the missing students. "I've been running from that place for 40 years, Bill said as we prepared our equipment. "Maybe it's time to stop running." We entered Sector 7 at dawn, following the last known coordinates of Dr. Huang's primary GPS signal. The moment we crossed the invisible boundary, I felt it. That familiar wrongness, like the world had shifted a degree to the left of normal. Our compasses spun wildly before settling on a north that couldn't possibly be correct. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in the span of 3 steps, and the silence. God, the silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind, just our breathing and footsteps, sounding muffled and distant even to our own ears. We found the students' base camp after an hour of hiking. Everything was perfectly arranged. Tents set up, equipment laid out methodically, notebooks open on a folding table with fresh notes still drying. The thermal sensors they'd brought were still running, showing impossible readings, heat signatures moving underground in patterns that looked almost organic, almost intelligent. But the students were gone. Not missing, gone. Their clothes were laid out on the ground in perfect human shapes, as if they'd simply evaporated out of them. Their boots were still laced, standing upright. In Dr. Huang's jacket pocket, her phone was recording video, had been for the past 3 days, despite the battery only lasting 12 hours maximum. I picked up the phone, and what I saw on that recording changed everything. It showed the 4 students setting up camp, normal at first. Then, at 11:47 a.m. on October 15th, they all stopped moving simultaneously, turning to look at something off camera. Their expressions went from curiosity to wonder to something beyond terror. A kind of cosmic realization that human faces weren't meant to show. The video kept recording as they stood there, frozen, for 6 hours. Then, at 5:47 p.m., they began to move again, but wrong. They moved in perfect synchronization, like marionettes controlled by a single puppeteer. They carefully removed their clothes, folding each item precisely, and then they walked, naked, towards something the camera couldn't see. As they walked, they became transparent, fading like old photographs, until they simply weren't there anymore. But the video didn't stop. It kept recording for 3 more days, and in those 3 days, it captured things that shouldn't exist. The phone had recorded everything for 3 days after the students vanished. At first, it just showed the empty campsite, but as night fell on the first day, things began to change. Lights appeared in the darkness. Not artificial lights, but something organic, bioluminescent, moving through the trees in patterns that suggested intelligence. They pulsed in sequences that looked almost like Morse code, but when we tried to decode it later, it translated to coordinates that placed us in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 2,000 feet underwater. On the second day, the video showed people walking through the campsite. Not the students, but other people, dressed in clothing from different eras. A man in a 1920s park ranger uniform walked past, checking equipment that wasn't there. A Native American woman in traditional dress that predated European contact knelt by the hot spring the students had been studying, performing some kind of ritual. A group of what looked like modern hikers sat around a campfire that didn't exist in our reality, roasting marshmallows and laughing at jokes the camera couldn't hear. But it was the third day that made my blood freeze. The camera, still recording from Doctor. Huang's jacket pocket showed our arrival. It showed Maria, Tom, Bill, and me entering the campsite, finding the clothes, picking up the phone. But we weren't alone in the footage. Standing right behind us, perfectly mimicking our movements, were 4 other figures. Translucent, distorted, but unmistakably the missing students. They were trying to speak to us, their mouths moving frantically, but no sound came through. And behind them, barely visible in the frame, was something else. Something vast and dark that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the camera could capture. "Jesus Christ," Maria whispered, looking at the screen over my shoulder. "They're still here. They're right here with us." Tom had pulled out an EMF detector, and it was going haywire, showing electromagnetic signatures surrounding us, moving in patterns that matched the movements of the transparent figures in the video. We were standing in the same space as the students, separated by something thinner than paper but more absolute than death. Bill, who'd been examining the thermal equipment, called us over. "You need to see this," he said, his voice shaking for the first time since I'd known him. The thermal sensors weren't just detecting heat. They were detecting temporal variations, pockets where time was moving at different speeds. According to the readings, in some spots just feet from where we stood, only seconds had passed since October 15th. In others, years had gone by. The students hadn't just disappeared. They'd been scattered across time, existing in every moment simultaneously. "We need to leave," Bill said. "Now. Before—" He never finished the sentence. The ground beneath us began to vibrate. Not like an earthquake, but like a frequency. A sound too low to hear, but powerful enough to feel in our bones. The air started to shimmer, and through those shimmers, I could see other versions of Sector 7, some where the forest was denser, others where it was a barren wasteland, one where the entire area was underwater. And in all of them, I could see people. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all the missing hikers and rangers who'd vanished in Sector 7 over the decades. They existed in every timeline simultaneously, aware of all realities but unable to fully exist in any of them. They were trying to warn us, trying to communicate, but their messages came through as overlapping noise, a cacophony of decades of desperate attempts to bridge the gap between their existence and ours. Maria grabbed my arm. "David, look at your hands." I looked down and nearly screamed. My hands were flickering, solid one moment, translucent the next. I could see through them to the ground below, but I could also see other versions of them, older, younger, scarred, pristine. I was beginning to scatter across timelines, just like the students. "The protocol!" Tom shouted. "Remember the protocol!" The protocol. Something I'd read in the Green Journal but never believed would work. A desperate measure developed by a ranger in 1989 who'd managed to escape Sector 7 after being partially scattered. It required an anchor, something from outside Sector 7 that could pull you back to a single timeline. I reached for my radio, tuning it to the emergency frequency that connected to the ranger station outside Sector 7. The static that came through was unlike anything I'd heard. Voices from past and future overlapping, emergency calls from incidents that hadn't happened yet, responses to disasters from years ago. But underneath it all, I heard a familiar voice. "David? David, is that you?" It was Susan Martinez working dispatch at the main station. Her voice was the anchor I needed, a fixed point in normal time. "Susan, keep talking," I managed to say, watching my hand solidify slightly as I focused on her voice. "Just keep talking. About anything. About normal things." She must have heard the desperation in my voice because she started rambling about her day. The tourist who'd tried to pet a bison, the coffee maker breaking in the break room, her daughter's school play next week. Mundane, beautiful, normal things that existed in linear time, in the reality I was trying to hold on to. Using Susan's voice as an anchor, we began to move toward the boundary of Sector 7. Every step was agony, fighting against the pull of scattered time. Bill collapsed twice, aging and de-aging rapidly before Tom and I managed to pull him forward. Maria's hair went white, then black, then fell out entirely before regrowing in seconds. The forest around us kept shifting, sometimes dense and primordial, sometimes a charred wasteland, sometimes not there at all, replaced by geothermal features that shouldn't exist. And through it all, the missing students followed us. Not physically, but as impressions in the air, distortions in the light that showed their faces twisted in permanent screams. They were trying to use us as anchors, trying to pull themselves back into linear time, but they'd been scattered too long. The best they could do was create videos, sending messages through quantum fluctuations that somehow uploaded to social media, cries for help from across fractured time. We made it to the boundary of Sector 7 just as the sun was setting, that liminal time when the barriers were weakest. As we crossed back into normal space-time, I felt something tear inside me, like part of my consciousness had been left behind, scattered across all those other timelines. I've never been whole since that day. Sometimes I catch glimpses of other times. I'll see a building that won't be constructed for 10 years, or remember conversations that haven't happened yet. But we survived. Physically, at least. The aftermath was chaos. The university wanted their students back. The families demanded answers. The Park Service wanted everything contained, classified, forgotten. But you can't classify videos that are already spreading across social media, uploaded by accounts that belong to people who technically no longer existed in our timeline. The videos kept coming. Dr. Huang's account posted a video dated November 2024, 13 months in the future from when she disappeared. In it, she stood in what looked like Sector 7 but transformed. The hot springs were massive, the trees were crystalline, and in the sky, Yellowstone's supervolcano was erupting in slow motion, frozen mid-explosion. She looked directly at the camera and said, "We found it." The source. The place where all times meet. It's not a location, it's an event, happening always and never. The volcano isn't going to erupt. It already has, will have, is erupting. In every timeline except ours. Sector 7 is the cork, the seal. If it fully opens, all timelines collapse into one. Her student, Michael Park, posted a video from 1987 somehow. He was younger than he should be, wearing clothes that didn't exist yet, standing next to a geyser that had been dormant since 1959. Time isn't linear here, he said to the camera. It's circular. Every moment exists simultaneously. We're not lost, we're everywhere. We're in every photo you've ever taken in Yellowstone, just outside the frame. We're in every timeline, trying to prevent them from converging. But we're failing. The boundaries are weakening. The Park Service tried damage control. They claimed the videos were elaborate hoaxes, deep fakes created by attention seekers. They increased security around Sector 7, installed motion sensors and cameras. But the cameras showed more than they bargained for. Every full moon, they recorded thousands of figures standing at the boundary of Sector 7, all the missing people from across time, standing silent vigil, keeping something contained through their mere presence. Bill Hutchins quit after our expedition. He moved to Florida, as far from Yellowstone as he could get within the continental U.S., but distance didn't matter. He called me last week, his voice shaking. "I can see it, David," he said. "Sector 7, it's here too. It's everywhere, just hidden. Every place where time wears thin. I walked past a drainage pond near my condo, and I saw them. The students still trying to get home. They exist in every reflection, every shadow, every moment between moments." Maria transferred to a desk job, but she couldn't escape either. She started experiencing temporal shifts, arriving at work before she'd left home, answering emails that wouldn't be sent for days. The Park Service quietly retired her on full disability, another casualty of Sector 7 that would never appear in official records. Tom Whitehorse went back to his reservation in Montana. His grandfather performed a ceremony, something ancient that predated European contact, trying to seal the fractures in Tom's timeline. It helped, somewhat. Tom can mostly stay in the present now, though he still sometimes speaks to people who died years ago or haven't been born yet. As for me, I stayed. Someone has to. Someone has to monitor Sector 7, keep people out, maintain the boundary between linear time and the chaos that exists in that 12-square-mile zone. I update the Green Journal daily, documenting the increasing incidents, the strengthening signals from scattered time, because it's getting worse. Climate change is affecting the park in unexpected ways. The increased geothermal activity is weakening the barriers between timelines. The underground magma chambers that feed Yellowstone's features also feed Sector 7, but not with heat. They feed it with possibility, with quantum uncertainty. With the raw stuff of reality before it crystallizes into a single timeline. Last month's incident with the students wasn't unique. It was part of an acceleration. In the past year alone, we've had 17 confirmed scatterings, people dispersed across time within Sector 7. Some managed to send messages back, videos, photos, sometimes physical objects that appear in locations they shouldn't be. A smartphone from 2023 was found in a tree that was cored by researchers, embedded in rings that dated to 1847. A handwritten note from a missing hiker appeared in a library book that had been checked out before they were born. The other rangers have started calling me the Keeper of Seven, the one who knows the most about that forbidden zone. They come to me with their strange experiences, their impossible sightings, their temporal inconsistencies. I document everything, building a database of the impossible, trying to find patterns in chaos. I've identified several constants. First, Electronic devices act as conduits between timelines. The more advanced the technology, the easier it is for the scattered to send messages through. Second, certain people are more susceptible to scattering, those with specific genetic markers, though we haven't identified what makes them vulnerable. Third, and most disturbing, the zone is expanding. Slowly, maybe an inch a year, but measurably. At this rate, Old Faithful will be within Sector 7's influence by 2150. The Park Service knows, the government knows. There are contingency plans, evacuation protocols for when, not if, Sector 7 experiences what they call a temporal cascade event. They've run simulations of what would happen if all timelines suddenly collapsed into one. The results are classified beyond my clearance level, but I've seen enough to know it would make the supervolcano eruption look like a minor inconvenience. 3 weeks after the incident with Dr. Huang and her students, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a thumb drive and a note in handwriting I recognized but couldn't place. You're not alone. Sector 7 is not unique. Check the files, a friend from Station 0. Station 0. I'd seen that reference once in the Green Journal, a single entry from 1981 that mentioned coordinating with Station 0 protocols, but gave no details. The thumb drive contained something that changed everything I thought I knew about Sector 7 and my role in containing it. There were files from 12 other national parks. Denali had their boundary zones. The Grand Canyon had echo sites. Everglades had transition wells. Each park had areas where reality wore thin, where time became nonlinear, where people vanished into scattered existence. And they all had rangers like me, keepers who monitored these zones, documented the impossible, and tried to prevent the worst from happening. The files included contact protocols, encrypted communication channels, and most importantly, a date, November 11th, 2023. A gathering at a location marked only by coordinates that placed it in the middle of nowhere, Montana. The note at the bottom was simple: Annual Summit. Your attendance is required. I requested leave, telling my supervisor I needed to deal with a family emergency. He didn't question it. After 19 years, I'd earned that trust. I drove through the night, following GPS coordinates that led me deeper into wilderness, onto roads that weren't on any map, until I reached what looked like an abandoned ranger station from the 1950s. But it wasn't abandoned. Inside were 23 other rangers from parks across North America. I recognized some faces from photos in the files: Sarah Chen from Denali, Marcus Williams from the Grand Canyon, Elena Rodriguez from Everglades. We were all keepers, all carrying the burden of knowing about the zones where reality fractured. The meeting was led by someone I hadn't expected: Patricia Downs, the ranger who'd aged 15 years and 6 hours back in 2001. She looked ancient now, though she should have only been in her 50s. Time doesn't work right for us anymore, she said, addressing the group. Once you've been exposed to a zone, you're partially unstuck in time. I age differently depending on which timeline I'm predominantly existing in at any given moment. Some days I'm 30, others I'm 90. Today, she looked at her wrinkled hands. Today I'm every age I've ever been. She explained what I'd begun to suspect. The zones weren't random geological anomalies. They were entry points, places where our reality touched others, where the boundaries between possible timelines were thinnest. Yellowstone Sector 7 was one of the most active because it sat on top of the supervolcano. The massive geological energy created a kind of beacon across dimensions. Every timeline where Yellowstone erupted, every reality where it didn't, every possible version of this place, they all converge at Sector 7, Patricia explained. The missing people, the scattered ones, they're not lost. They're holding the boundaries in place. Their consciousness, spread across multiple timelines, acts as a kind of net, preventing the realities from fully merging. Marcus, from the Grand Canyon, raised his hand. So, we're essentially feeding people to these zones to prevent... What exactly? To prevent all timelines from collapsing into one, Patricia said. Imagine every possible version of history happening simultaneously. Every war that was won and lost. Every person who lived and died. Every natural disaster that did and didn't occur. All existing in the same space at the same time. Reality couldn't handle the paradoxes. It would simply cease. The room was silent as we absorbed this. Then Elena spoke up. The videos from the missing people, the ones that keep appearing on social media, are their way of maintaining connection to our timeline, Patricia finished. As long as they can communicate with our reality, they can help anchor it. The moment those messages stop, she trailed off, but we all understood. She showed us data from the past 50 years. The zones were becoming more active, more people were being scattered, and the boundaries were weakening. Climate change was part of it. The physical changes to the Earth were affecting the quantum stability of these locations. But there was something else, something that had accelerated in the past decade. Technology, Patricia said. Smartphones, GPS, digital cameras, they're all quantum devices at their core, manipulating electrons and photons. Every tourist who brings their phone into a park is carrying a potential bridge between timelines. The more connected our world becomes, the thinner the boundaries get. She pulled up a map showing all known zones across the world. There were hundreds of them, each monitored by someone like us. Each a potential breach point where reality could unravel. Yellowstone's Sector 7 was marked with a pulsing red dot. Yours is going critical, she told me directly. The incident with the students was just the beginning. Our models show a major event within the next year, something that will make containment impossible. What kind of event? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She hesitated, then pulled up another file. It was a video, but not from our timeline. It showed Yellowstone, but different. Old Faithful was erupting continuously, the sky was the wrong color, and in the background, multiple suns hung in the sky. This is from timeline 47B, she said. One where Sector 7 fully opened in 1989. The ranger there, another version of you actually, managed to send this through before their reality collapsed entirely. Every person in that timeline exists in a state of temporal flux, experiencing every moment of their lives simultaneously. They're conscious, aware, but unable to act, unable to change anything. Trapped in an eternal present that contains all presence. The video showed people, tourists, rangers, locals, standing frozen but somehow also moving, their images blurred like long-exposure photographs. Their faces showed expressions of horror, joy, birth, death, all at once. It was the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen, and I'd seen a lot in Sector 7. This is what we're preventing, Patricia said. Every person who gets scattered in the zones, every one we lose, their sacrifice to keep this from happening to everyone. Sarah Chen from Denali spoke up. There has to be another way. We can't just keep feeding people to these things. We're working on alternatives, Patricia said. There's research into technological solutions, ways to artificially strengthen the boundaries. But until then, we maintain the protocols. We keep people out when we can. We document everything. And when someone does get scattered, she paused, looking directly at me. We make sure their sacrifice isn't wasted. The summit continued for 3 days. We shared techniques for identifying zone boundaries, compared notes on temporal anomalies, and developed new protocols for the increasing incidents. I learned that my experience in Sector 7 was actually mild compared to some. The Everglades Ranger, Elena, had watched an entire tour group of 30 people simultaneously exist as children and elderly, aging and dying and being born in an endless loop until she managed to pull them out, though 3 remained scattered, their consciousness spread across every moment of their existence. On the final night, Patricia took me aside. "There's something else you need to know about Sector 7, she said. "Something not in the official files." She handed me a photograph, old, from maybe the 1960s. It showed a group of rangers standing at what I recognized as the boundary of Sector 7. One of them looked exactly like me. That's your grandfather," she said. "He was the first keeper of 7. It's why you're resistant to the scattering, why you can enter and leave while maintaining temporal cohesion. It's genetic. Your family has been connected to that place for generations." I stared at the photo. I'd never known my grandfather. He'd died before I was born. My father had said he was a ranger, but never mentioned Yellowstone. "There's a theory," Patricia continued, "that the zones choose their keepers, that they identify bloodlines that can withstand the temporal stress and ensure those family members end up as rangers. You didn't choose this job, David. It chose you. Sector 7 chose you before you were born." I drove back to Yellowstone with my head spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my career, my purpose, it had all been predetermined by a fracture in reality that my grandfather had discovered decades ago. When I returned to the park, things had gotten worse. In my absence, 2 more hikers had entered Sector 7 despite the increased security. But this time they hadn't scattered. They'd returned, but changed. They moved normally, spoke normally, but thermal imaging showed they existed at a different temperature than their surroundings, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, constantly fluctuating. And when they spoke about their experience, they all said the same thing: the convergence is coming. All timelines are beginning to synchronize. The scattered ones are gathering, preparing for something. The mountain is going to breathe, and when it does, every possible Yellowstone will exist at once. I quarantined them, keeping them under observation. Their presence was affecting local time. Clocks ran differently in their vicinity. Plants grew and died in accelerated cycles, and anyone who spent too much time near them began experiencing temporal displacement. That night, alone in my office, I opened the green journal and added my entry. But as I wrote, words appeared on the page that I wasn't writing. In handwriting I recognized as my own, but older, more shaky. "David, this is you, from Timeline 23A. The convergence already happened here. I'm scattered across 40 years, existing in every moment from 1984 to 2024 simultaneously. I can see all possibilities, all outcomes. There's only one way to prevent it in your timeline. You have to enter Sector 7 during the winter solstice. You have to become the anchor. You have to scatter yourself to save everyone else. The bloodline demands it. Grandfather did it in his timeline. Father did it in his. Now, it's your turn." December 21st, 2023. Dawn, the exact center of Sector 7. Bring the green journal. Bring everything. Become everything. The words faded as quickly as they'd appeared, but I'd read them. I'd photographed them. They were real, or as real as anything was anymore. I had 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks to decide if I would sacrifice my linear existence to prevent a temporal cascade that would unravel reality itself. 6 weeks to say goodbye to a normal life I'd never really had anyway. December 21st, 2023. Winter solstice. 5:47 a.m. I stood at the boundary of Sector 7, the green journal tucked under my arm, wearing every piece of monitoring equipment I could carry. The temperature was -15, but the cold felt distant, unimportant compared to what I was about to do. In my pocket was a letter to whoever would find it, explaining everything, though I doubted anyone would truly understand. The 6 weeks since receiving the message from my other timeline self had been a blur of preparation and goodbye. I'd trained my replacement, a young ranger named Jessica Winters, who had the same unconscious awareness of temporal anomalies that marked potential keepers. I'd digitized every entry in the Green Journal, uploading it to secure servers and sending copies to every keeper I'd met at the summit. If I failed, if I scattered without anchoring the timelines, at least the knowledge would survive. I'd also done something the protocols forbade. I'd told someone the truth. My sister, living in Seattle, thinking her park ranger brother had a nice, safe job watching tourists and wildlife. I'd told her everything, showed her the videos from scattered time, the photos that couldn't exist. She'd cried, begged me not to go through with it, but she understood. Someone outside the system needed to know, needed to remember me as I was before I became what Sector 7 needed me to be. The morning of the solstice was eerily calm. No wind, no wildlife. Even the geothermal features seemed subdued. As I crossed into Sector 7, my equipment immediately went haywire. But this time, instead of chaotic readings, everything showed the same thing: massive temporal convergence, all timelines beginning to synchronize at a single point, the exact center of Sector 7. The hike that should have taken 2 hours took both forever and no time at all. With each step, I existed more in multiple moments. I was 8 years old, visiting Yellowstone for the first time with my parents. I was 30, getting my job as a ranger. I was 70, an age I hadn't reached yet, looking back on a life that had and hadn't happened. All these moments layered on top of each other, translucent, real, equally present. The forest around me flickered through seasons, through decades, through possibilities. I walked through snow and summer grass simultaneously, past trees that were saplings and ancient giants and burned stumps all at once. The scattered ones were visible now, all of them, hundreds of people existing in temporal flux, their consciousness spread across every moment they'd ever experienced or would experience. Dr. Huang was there, or at least one version of her, looking exactly as she had the day she disappeared, but also aged beyond measure. Young and old and every age between. "You came," she said, her voice a harmony of all her ages speaking at once. "We've been waiting. We've always been waiting. We will always have been waiting." "Tell me what I need to do," I said, surprised that my voice still sounded singular, still anchored in one timeline. "You need to become the focal point," she explained, leading me deeper into Sector 7. "Right now, we're all scattered randomly across time, creating chaos, allowing the timelines to bleed through. But if one person, someone with the right genetic markers, the right resistance, scatters themselves deliberately at the convergence point, they can create order. Become a lens that focuses all the temporal energy, keeping the timelines separate but stable." We reached the center of Sector 7, and I understood why no maps showed this place accurately. It wasn't a fixed location. It was every location it had ever been or could be. A hot spring that was also a glacier, also a meadow, also a volcanic vent. The heart of Yellowstone's temporal anomaly, the place where the supervolcano's energy had worn reality so thin that all possibilities existed simultaneously. The other scattered ones had gathered in a circle, or what passed for a circle in nonlinear space. They existed in multiple positions at once, creating a pattern that hurt to perceive but felt mathematically perfect. In the center was an absence, a space waiting to be filled. Your grandfather stood here in 1962, Patricia Downs said, appearing as both the young ranger she'd been and the ancient woman she'd become. He held the convergence for 30 years, until the burden passed to your father in 1992. Your father held it until 2001, when I tried to take his place but wasn't strong enough. The zone has been without a proper anchor since then, growing more unstable each year. My father was a ranger? I asked, confused. He died when I was 5. Mom said he was an accountant. He was, in this timeline, Patricia said, but he was also a ranger in the timeline where he took the burden. He existed in both states simultaneously, living a normal life while also being scattered across time, anchoring Sector 7. The strain of maintaining that duality killed him young in your timeline, but his sacrifice kept the zone stable for years. I thought of my father, the few memories I had of him. Always distracted, always looking at something no one else could see. My mother said he had mental health issues, but now I understood. He'd been seeing all timelines at once, holding them apart through sheer will and genetic predisposition. If I do this, I said, what happens to me? You become like us, Doctor. Huang said, but more. We're scattered randomly, experiencing our timelines without control. You'll be scattered deliberately with purpose. You'll exist in every moment of Sector 7's existence, past and future simultaneously. You'll be able to influence events, prevent the worst breaches, guide people away from danger, but you'll never be able to fully return to linear time. You'll be the guardian, Elena Rodriguez said. When had she arrived from the Everglades? Every zone needs one. Someone who exists across all timelines to maintain stability. Most of us thought they were myths, legends. But Yellowstone's guardian bloodline is real. I looked around at the scattered ones, these people who had been lost to time, but had found purpose in their loss. They were holding reality together through their mere existence. Their consciousness spread across timelines like a net, keeping the possibilities from collapsing into chaos. The convergence is accelerating, someone said. I couldn't tell who anymore as all their voices were beginning to harmonize. If you're going to do this, it has to be now. I walked to the center of the circle, to the absence that waited for me. The moment I stepped into that space, I felt it. The pull of infinite timelines all trying to claim me at once. My body wanted to scatter in every direction, every possibility, every moment that had ever existed in Sector 7. But I had the Green Journal, the record of every anomaly, every incident, every moment of temporal instability in Yellowstone's history. I opened it, and instead of pages, I saw the actual events, every entry playing out before me simultaneously. I saw my grandfather's first encounter with Sector 7, my father's sacrifice, Patricia's failed attempt, the hundreds of people who had been lost and lost again. And I saw the future, all possible futures. Timelines where Yellowstone erupted tomorrow, timelines where it never erupted, timelines where humanity never existed, timelines where we'd evolved beyond physical form. They all converged here at this point, in this moment that existed outside of moments. I let myself scatter. It wasn't painful exactly, it was overwhelming. Imagine experiencing every second of your life simultaneously, every breath, every heartbeat, every thought occurring at once. Then expand that to include every second you might have lived, every choice you didn't make, every path you didn't take. Then expand it further to include every moment of everyone who had ever entered Sector 7, their experiences becoming part of your consciousness. I was David Carson, Park Ranger, age 42. I was also David Carson, the child who had never been born because his parents never met. I was David Carson, the accountant, following in his father's false footsteps. I was David Carson, the scattered guardian, existing across all timelines to keep them from collapsing. The other scattered ones helped, their consciousness guiding mine, teaching me how to exist in multiple states without losing cohesion. Dr. Huang showed me how to use academic focus to catalog the timelines. Her students demonstrated how to maintain identity across temporal flux. Patricia taught me the techniques she'd learned in her brief time as guardian, and gradually I found my center. Not a physical center, but a conceptual one. The purpose that kept me coherent across all timelines. I was the keeper of 7, the guardian of the convergence point, the one who ensured that all possible Yellowstones could exist without destroying each other. The moment I achieved that stability, the chaos stopped. The equipment the Rangers were monitoring outside Sector 7 suddenly showed normal readings. The temporal fluctuations ceased. The scattered ones were still scattered, but organized now, each existing in their assigned timelines rather than randomly flickering between possibilities. But I could still communicate. Through electronics, through quantum fluctuations, through the videos that appeared on social media from accounts that shouldn't exist. I posted my first message 3 days after the convergence, though from my perspective it was simultaneously 3 seconds and 3 centuries. This is David Carson, former ranger at Yellowstone National Park. I exist now in all times within Sector 7, maintaining the boundary between what is and what could be. The zone is stable. The convergence has been prevented. But the price of that stability is eternal vigilance. I will be here always, have always been here, will always have been here. If you enter Sector 7, you might see me. Every version of me, from every timeline. Don't be afraid. I'm here to help, to guide you back to linear time. But please, respect the boundaries. Some places aren't meant for normal human consciousness. Some sacrifices shouldn't be necessary. Stay on the marked trails. Stay in your timeline. Let me carry this burden so you don't have to. That was 6 months ago, or yesterday, or 100 years from now. Time doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore. I exist in every moment of Sector 7 simultaneously, watching, guarding, preventing the worst possibilities from manifesting. Sometimes I can manifest physically enough to warn hikers away from dangerous temporal rifts. I appear as different ages depending on which timeline I'm primarily focused on at that moment. The other rangers have learned to recognize me. Sometimes I'm the old man who warns them about unstable areas. Sometimes the child who points them back to safe trails. Sometimes exactly as I was the day I scattered. Jessica Winters, my replacement, maintains the Green Journal now. She documents my appearances, the messages I send through fractured time, the warnings I whisper through electronic interference. She's good at the job, has the right instincts. Maybe someday she'll have a child who will inherit the burden, though I hope by then we'll have found a better solution. The Park Service has officially closed Sector 7 to the public, citing unstable geological conditions. They're not wrong, just not specific about what kind of instability. The area is ringed with sensors, cameras, and warning signs. But people still find their way in. The curious, the desperate, the ones who've heard the stories and don't believe them or believe them too much. When they enter, I'm there. All of me, every version, every possibility. I guide them when I can, warn them when they'll listen, and when they won't. I try to minimize the damage. Sometimes they scatter, despite my efforts, joining our eternal vigil. Each new, scattered consciousness makes the network stronger, but also more complex, more difficult to maintain. Dr. Huang and her students still send their videos, their messages from across time. They've become quite good at it, learning to manipulate their scattered existence to communicate important information. They've prevented 3 major temporal breaches in the past month alone. identifying weak points in the timeline and reinforcing them with their consciousness. The other parks check in regularly through the quantum communication network we've established. The Denali situation has stabilized since they found their own guardian bloodline. The Grand Canyon's echo sites are quieter now, though still dangerous. The Everglades transition wells remain active but manageable. But Yellowstone is special. The supervolcano makes it a nexus, a point where more timelines converge than anywhere else on Earth. That's why it needs a permanent guardian, why my family line has been bound to this place for generations. We're not just rangers, we're antibodies in the system of reality, keeping the infection of temporal chaos from spreading. Sometimes, in the versions of me that exist in peaceful timelines, I wonder if it was worth it. Giving up linear existence, normal life, the possibility of a future that moves in only one direction. But then I see the alternatives, the timelines where I didn't scatter, where Sector 7 collapsed, where all possibilities converged into chaos. Billions of people experiencing every moment of their lives simultaneously, conscious but unable to act, trapped in an eternal present containing all presence. And I know I made the right choice. This is my confession, my explanation, my warning. Sector 7 is real. The forbidden zones in our national parks are real. The scattered ones are real. And they're holding reality together through their sacrifice, their consciousness spread across time like a net, keeping the possible from collapsing into the actual. If you visit Yellowstone, stay on the marked trails. Don't investigate the areas that aren't on maps. Don't follow the voices that call from places that shouldn't exist. And if you see someone who looks like me but wrong, too young, too old, translucent, multiplied, know that I'm there to help. I'm keeping the timelines apart, maintaining the boundaries, ensuring that your reality remains singular and linear. Because that's what guardians do. We exist in the spaces between possibilities, in the moments between moments, holding the line against chaos. We sacrifice our singular existence so billions can maintain theirs. My name was David Carson. I was a ranger at Yellowstone National Park for 19 years. Now I'm something else, a consciousness scattered across time, a guardian of the convergence point, a keeper of impossible boundaries. And I'll be here forever, in every moment, keeping Sector 7 contained. Keep to the marked trails, trust the maps, and remember, some places aren't forbidden to punish you. They're forbidden to protect you. Welcome to Yellowstone. Enjoy your linear stay.